Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the Gospel of Luke, and we're in the middle of chapter 5, beginning of chapter 6, and we're in the middle of this string of vignettes, this string of accounts, in which we see the Pharisees begin with the questions. They start out with a measure of faith, but that devolves into open hostility over the course of these events. And last time we were together, we saw the calling of Levi, the calling of Matthew. It starts out with Jesus doing something, we touching a leper. We know they would really be upset about. And then they come on the scene, and we see them thinking in their minds, why is he saying this? And Jesus responding to their thoughts. In the next account, the calling of Matthew, they start to grumble about Jesus, but not to him, only to his disciples. And then Jesus answers them directly. Today, they're going to grumble to Jesus about his disciples. So, um, let's look at chapter 5, verses 33 through 37. Luke chapter 5, 33 through 37. And they said to him, the disciples of John often fast and offer prayers. The disciples of the Pharisees also do the same. But yours eat and drink. Why are you here partying anyway with anybody? Jesus said to them, you cannot make the attendants of the bridegroom fast while the bridegroom is with them. But the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them. Then they will fast in those days. And he was also telling them a parable. No one tears a piece from a new garment and puts it on an old garment. Otherwise, he will both tear new and old. The new and the piece from the new will not match the old. No one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins, and it will be spilled out, and the skins will be ruined. New wine must be put into fresh wineskins. And no one, after drinking old wine, wishes for new, for he says the old is good enough. Okay. Um, so um, there's the whole business of fasting. Now, the Jews in the Old Testament were in the Mosaic Law were commanded one fast day, one Yom Kippur, and that's the only fast day, the Day of Atonement, that they are commanded to observe in the law. However, during the Babylonian captivity, when they developed all these different institutions and practices to hold on to their Jewishness, their Judaism, while they were away from Jerusalem and the temple was in ruins, they started observing regular fast days every week. And if you were truly observant, you would fast at least twice a week, generally Tuesdays and Fridays. And John's followers were fasting. John still has an identifiable group of disciples that follow him, even though he has pointed out to his disciples that Jesus is the Lamb of God. But they're still his disciples are still his disciples, and they are fasting, and the disciples, those under the influence of the Pharisees, they fast as well. Why don't your disciples fast? What's wrong with them? You know, and so they're not really accusing him of breaking the law, but of disrespecting tradition, which to them is as necessary and honestly in their hearts were they to admit it to themselves more important than the law itself. Um, so Jesus has an answer, and it comes from their traditions. He uses their tradition to answer their question because in rabbinic teaching, these fast days, Tuesdays and Fridays, if you were at a wedding, you didn't have to do that. A wedding is a 7 day event. And so you're certainly going to be at a wedding over the course of at least one of those 2 days, maybe both of them. And if you're at a wedding, then you don't have to fast because you're at a wedding. You are released from the responsibility of your twice a week fast, which is from sun up to sundown. It's not a true fast. I mean, it's a sun up to sundown fast. It's not going without food for 24 hours. Anyway, that was their tradition. And he says, um, I'm the bridegroom, and they're in the wedding party, and therefore it's not appropriate for them to fast. A time will come when they will fast, when I'm not with them anymore, but I'm here now, and they're going to fast. It's important for us to notice that Jesus expects that we will fast. He says in Matthew chapter 6, when you fast, not if you fast. And I don't know too many Christians who make fasting a part of their spiritual regimen, their spiritual life. Um, but that's as it should be, because if you do, I'm not supposed to know about it. That's between you and God. And if I do it, it's between me and God too. I just want to point that out, that we should set aside time, um, to fast from food, to fast from screens, to clear space in our lives, for God's presence. But Jesus is God with them. He's right there in their midst, and it's not appropriate. And then he talks about the what's the inappropriateness of trying to apply the old to the new. And we got to be careful. He's using parables, and and old and new. He's given the general principle. Um, um, it's easy to misread this section, and especially the last verse, and think that Jesus is prioritizing the law over the new covenant because it is the old. But no, I mean, the promise of salvation through a Messiah, God's plan to redeem humanity, is older than the law of Moses. The law of Moses is a part of that plan. It's a tool in that plan. But God's plan to redeem humanity is the old stuff. It's not the new stuff. Jesus teaches them using a parable. Again, we see how clearly, simply, and authoritatively Jesus teaches. You can't take a piece of unshrunk cloth and use it to patch up a piece of shrunk cloth, because in the wash you're going to rip everything. You don't put new wine, which is still fermenting and bubbling up, into old stiff wineskins. The old wineskins for the old wine that are valuable because they're for the old wine are going to burst, and you're going to lose the wine and the wineskins. You you can't take your old ways and superimpose them on the truth of the Messianic kingdom. They don't fit. It will be to the destruction of both. That's a long-term lesson. That's the reason the book of Hebrews was written. You just can't. You can't. It doesn't work. Um, and then he says, if you've tasted the old and the new, you want the old. Well, the old is not the Mosaic law. The Mosaic law came after God's plan to redeem humanity went into motion. That's the old stuff. The promise made to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. That's the old stuff, the good stuff. And that's what Jesus is bringing. Jesus is bringing fulfillment to that eternal covenant God made with humanity through Abraham. Okay. Well, we're going to pick up with chapter 6 next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.